Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Courtney Octor. I'm a business development manager at Integro, and today I am joined by Bob Kalka, who is responsible for he's the global head of IBM security, and also Jim Skidmore, vice president of the solutions group at Integro. So two great people who've been in the trenches when it comes to identity and access management and how to automate that process and really kind of teach us what to look for and how to improve this area. So really going to be a fruitful discussion today. Thank you so much for joining us. Just a little bit of housekeeping. If you do have any questions, feel free to pop that in the Q&A part of our event, and we will answer your questions at the end. So I'm going to pass this along to Bob, who will kick us off.
Okay, hey everybody, it's great to see you all. Again, in some cases. So Bob Kelk, I run the IBM security business globally. I've been doing security at IBM for the last 32 years. And I'm joined on this call by a guy who probably has about as many years in cyber. I think we're well over 50 years combined. Jim, why don't you introduce yourself?
Yeah, so Jim Skidmore, like Bob said, I've been working in this realm and with Bob and IBM Security Advisory Board and a lot of different parts of this for, well over a quarter century. So
what we're going to dive into today is talking. We chose this fascinating title for a reason: a manual IAM, manual identity access management, as an attack surface. Saying that everybody's automating everything is kind of almost cliche-ish now. But what we're going to get into is that there's certain developments around identity and access management that is making the manual approach to managing both governance and access a huge problem. And so we're going to dive into that here as we get into that. So another thing that almost feels cliche-ish now to say, because we all know it. As one of our business partners like to say, hackers don't break in, they log in. 71% increase in cyber attacks, according to our IBM X-Force Threat Intelligence Index. A 71% year-over-year increase, almost doubling the used compromised credentials. And within those compromised credentials, 60% of all attacks are identity-based today. And in fact, a lot of people are using 80%. I think everybody's guessing to a degree. But let's just say that identities are involved definitely in a majority of attacks that are going on right now. And then along with that, we've got the fact that 84% of organizations have had identity-related breaches. But let me tell you another number that I find really encapsulates the problem well. That first stat, 71% year-to-year increase in compromised credentials being involved in a cyber attack. Our X-Force team in that study also took a look at how long, based on the root cause for the attack, what was the core thing, the core technique used in the attack? What is the average amount of time globally that it takes to discover and contain that attack? Not fully recover, just identify and contain it. And our X-Force team looked at literally every core reason for behind a cyber attack. And the worst one by far was using compromised credentials, leveraging compromised credentials. And it was 292 days on average to identify and contain the attack. There is no organization on earth that would be comfortable with the fact that it takes more than 2/3 of a year on average to identify and contain an identity-based attack using compromised credentials. So clearly, whether, everybody says identity is the new perimeter, and more people are saying that on a daily basis, and it's true. So what we want to show you on this is the why. Why is that happening? And showing you the kind of tidal wave headed our way, because most of the discussion so far that we've shared with you, we've all been thinking human identities. And as soon as we get into the non-human identities, especially agentic AI, that's when this gets really crazy. So within all of this, you'll find that one of the many themes we're going to share with you here is that you got to pay attention to identity observability. Because if you can't see this stuff happening, then you have no chance of doing anything about it. Okay. So what I want to start with is let's look at a non-human and human identity view of the world. What was it? 4 or 5 years ago, the term identity fabric became popular and everybody started talking about it. And, we in the vendor community, we all have this Achilles heel. And that Achilles heel is that when there's a term that you all say, hey, that really resonates with me, we all say, oh, that just happens to be what I do for a living, right? And all of a sudden the term loses its meaning because everybody says they do that thing. And identity fabric is one of those terms, right? When it came out originally from the analysts, the focus was on how do you take the various technologies you have for identity management, which, let's be clear, 99% of the focus was on human identities back then. And so how do we take your governance and your IAM and your workforce access and your PAM solution and all that stuff and get that stuff to actually work together? That's what the thing started on. We in the vendor community said, that's what we do. So all of a sudden it became everything. And so what we're going to talk about identity fabric on this call, as opposed to a vendor's capabilities, is just the philosophy of how do you get non-human and human identities managed, because they're fundamentally different, especially when you look at agentic, and we're going to look at that, right? So, as I said, I've been doing this over 3 decades. I'm with clients every day on this topic. And one of the fascinating things to me is that when we go in to a discussion now about identity management, is the first conversation that I'll usually ask is, hey, on the human side, because that's the thing that most of the CISOs and IT and stuff and the identity leaders have been focused on for the last couple of decades. And I'll say, what's your strategy for addressing workforce and consumer? And inevitably, I'll get the name of an IDP. They'll say, oh, we've standardized on IBM Verify, Okta, ForgeRock, Entra, right, Ping, whatever. And then I'll say, well, is that almost always SaaS-based solution? Are you going to use that for workforce? Do you have other IDPs for your workforce? And inevitably you get in a discussion that says, well, yeah, we've got one. And we actually have more than one. We have one that we homegrown wrote 25 years ago that we've been trying to get rid of for 10 or 15 years, but it's still there because it's hiding in some legacy apps that, we just, nobody wants to touch. And then we put in an on-prem solution about 12 to 15 years ago that was supposed to get rid of the homegrown one. But we still have that, right? So you go, okay, I've got multiple IDPs. And then, of course, you've got the legacy apps that not only might be using a homegrown IDP, or there's a lot of folks still have apps that have a side file with user IDs and passwords in them for that app. It's amazing, but it's there. And everybody goes, I can't touch that. The person that wrote it's not around anymore. We just deal with it. It's sunk cost. And then, of course, you have one or more clouds that you're managing identities in. So I have a somewhat playful term I like to use, that both human and non-human identities each have their own original sin. And the original sin of human identity management is this picture. It's disconnected teams and tools, managing things in multiple places, rationalizing some of that sprawl because, hey, it's legacy and nobody wants to deal with it. So that's the original sin for human identities. However, once again, about 2-3 years ago, we started noticing a lot of the conversations were migrating to the other side. Let's call it country and Western from a music point of view, both country and Western. And that would be the non-human side. And that's where you have machine IDs and secure APIs and the use of certificates and the big one, agentic AI, right? So what's the original sin on that? Because who's managing the non-human identities today? In most shops, it's the development teams, right? And it's very obvious to those of us that do this on a daily basis that most organizations have this unspoken vibe issue between CISO and IT and developers. Developers don't want to be bothered. They're doing things to, put in non-human identities to identify their agents and their apps and stuff, and they don't want to be bothered. And so everybody says we're collaborating, but more often than not, the collaboration is like a monthly call where you talk about ideas that you can collaborate, but nothing ever happens materially from it. So what we found is there's an original sin on this side of the fence as well. And the original sin for non-human identities is we see so many people just hard coding the secrets into their code and into their apps, into their agents. So If the original sin is disconnect teams and tools on the human side, and that disconnection has led to 60 to 80% of the attacks being, focusing on identities. And then on the non-human side in the development community, it's hard coding the secrets. That's the original sin there. You'll wonder why people aren't so worried, especially about the agentic AI side, which we're going to dive into more in a minute. So from a larger perspective point of view, when we talk about manual IAM that needs to be automated, we've identified with our new friends from HashiCorp, who we acquired a year ago, right? And of course, HashiCorp Vault is seen as the largest installed solution for non-human identity management in the world, many times over. And so we've collaborated with the HashiCorp team and partners, especially Jim and the Integro folks, to identify roughly 24 use cases people want to be able to do but are struggling to because of these two original sins. So let's look at that really briefly. The first one's identity observability. Remember, I said observability is key. What does observability mean? I'll give you the net of the most common observability issues that we're finding. On the human side of identity observability, every place we go into, we find shadow identities, shadow assets, and shadow directories. And people say, okay, well, what's the big deal with that? Well, if you have an LDAP directory that you set up 3 years ago for a project that ended 2 years ago, and it was supposed to be taken down, but you still have 53 people authenticating against it every day, IT doesn't know what's out there. You don't know if the policies, you don't know if the policy's set correctly. You don't know if the governance is correct against what's going on with it. Everybody we're finding has these shadow directories, especially. That's on the human side. On the non-human side, the observability finds where do you have hard-coded secrets in your code, but then it finds a big one. And that is on the non-human side is finding secrets management sprawl. So the typical way you issue and manage and get rid of a non-human identity is through a secrets management engine, such as HashiCorp Vault. And what happens is in the dev community, we'll often find a client will have 14 copies of HashiCorp Vault Community Edition, no management around these various instances, no governance at all. It's just individual dev teams using it. And then we'll usually find the dev teams are also sometimes using the built-in cert or key managers in GCP, Azure, right, the AWS, IBM Cloud, et cetera. And there's no rhyme or reason to it. And as soon as CISOs in particular right now see that secrets manager sprawl, they realize that that is an attack surface. That's all being done manually. That is an attack surface that has to be addressed. So this is just the first of 6 I'm going to show you, which we consider to be the biggest issues that are coming up in every one of our clients right now. But you see it applies to both human and non-human. Shadow directories, hard-coded secrets, secrets manager sprawl. These ones are coming up everywhere. Second, frictionless access, the user experience, right? We're kind of client zero for that here at IBM. We are running our business on our IBM Verify IDP, obviously, with 30.5 million users in production. We've rolled out to all of our employees, which is about 500,000 of those. We've rolled out passkeys, FIDO2 passkeys, right? Frictionless access. That rollout has gone so well that our CIO has announced that once we get a couple of more apps, there's a couple of apps that they're finishing up the integrations with, we're going to get rid of passwords as even being an option inside of IBM across the entire company. That's how well the frictionless access is working, and everybody likes it, and it's more secure. So that's an obvious one. Third, instead of hard coding secrets, use the secrets manager engine, right? So folks that are hard coding, at least with a secrets management engine, you're going to get that accountability and auditability path, because you're able to say, okay, for this specific agent or for this machine, we've issued this credential. What's interesting is even though this improves the situation, the vast majority, I mean, all caps, vast majority of folks are just issuing static secrets. So it's more secure because it's audible, but still a long living secret. So where everybody wants to get to is dynamic secrets, where you have short-lived secrets with limited scope on what that identity is able to do, what that non-human identity is able to do. And this becomes particularly critical around agentic AI, as we're going to show you in a minute. And then fifth is PAM. How can we still be talking about this, 23 years after SOX came out? And everybody said, thou shalt do PAM. Everybody does PAM today, but they only do it to a partial set of the privileged accounts. And so getting it to cover all the privileged accounts has become a major issue, especially with cyber insurance providers, who you're probably well aware of, pay a lot of attention to it. And then the sixth use case that is manual stuff people are having to do that needs to be automated is around what some people call ITDR, Identity Threat Detection Response. It's the operational side of that identity observability I talked about earlier. So identity observability is as some people call it ISPM, Identity Security Posture Management, ISPM. And that's about, once again, finding the shadow directories, finding the hard-coded secrets, finding the shadow management sprawl. The threat side, the real-time operational side, is finding things like bypass a policy. So one of the most common things that we find in shops is bypassing of MFA, right? You'll say, okay, for a user in this group to access this kind of application, the way we've architected things, they have to go through the MFA engine. There's no way around it. And the observability tooling, this ITDR tooling, will say, by the way, you've got a bunch of users in this group who are accessing that app, and it's never hitting the MFA engine. And the typical first response we'll hear is, that's impossible, there's no way. And then I'll look, oh, if those 6 exceptions are present, yeah, I guess that could be bypassed, right? And so you find those holes through observability and fix that. On the non-human side, this becomes huge in agentic AI, as we'll talk about in just a moment, is bypassing of the secrets manager altogether, where you see this agent pops up, it goes and does something and never gets a unique secret, a unique identifier, not unique non-human identity assigned to it. And the reason, of course, that's such a problem is you've lost accountability now. You don't know, what was that? You don't know. It doesn't have an identity. You can't track it. And we'll talk about some other issues around that in just a minute. So anyways, these are the 6 use cases that people are doing things manually, that we're seeing the need for automation to lower the risk profile. So the way we look at it at IBM with our HashiCorp friends is, how do you inspect, protect, and govern to address these use cases? So you got to find the secrets, you got to find the shadow directories, you got to find the secrets management sprawl, you got to implement both static and dynamic where appropriate secrets, right? You got to extend PAM to the whole environment. You got to be able to detect those bypasses around ITDR that I just mentioned. You have to be able to look at behavior. This is a big one. Remember, the number one problem is leveraging compromised credentials. In a cyber attack, 292 days on average to identify and contain the attack. How do you find that? Well, one of the ways you find that is, big surprise, through AI, is the ability to do behavioral analytics. So what we've done at IBM is we've taken our acquisition of Trusteer about 15, 20 years ago, which is the world leader in detecting banking, financial fraud and financial transactions. And what we've done is build that AI engine into our identity base. So now when a privileged user has their credential compromised and someone else is logging in with those credentials, we can just tell by the typing pattern, it's not them. It's not the person who authenticated the other 242 times. So real-time behavioral analytics is a way to automate this, right? And then governance, of course, we got to have the overall view. So the way we do this with Integro is that, first of all, if I summarize the use cases that are most common here, and then where we're going to go is the hottest one by far, is, first of all, how do you do static and dynamic secrets? Clearly, that's HashiCorp Vault. It's the class act of the industry, has been for a long time. And we also have the ability within HashiCorp Vault, through a new extension called Vault Radar, to find the hard-coded secrets that are being used, right? Then for frictionless access, like I shared, that's our IBM Verify does that. Now, one of the things we do at IBM, which is truly unique, nobody else is doing this, is when we say identity fabric, we go back to the original definition from the analysts, which is tools from multiple vendors ought to be able to collaborate. So for clients that don't have IBM verified but want to take advantage of this ability, for example, to extend frictionless access to your legacy apps like WebSphere apps, because a lot of the major IDPs on the market don't support WebSphere and some of the legacy apps like WebSphere. So what we've done is we've written the code to plug into the Oktas and the others of the world to allow them to actually extend into things like WebSphere applications. And so that's why in gray you see a Verify Application Gateway. That's a solution we have that doesn't require our IDP. It works with the other IDPs to allow you to do MFA and frictionless into legacy apps like WebSphere apps. Okay, and that's a true identity fabric approach. Then for secure access, it's once again, we have our Verify IDP that does that. It's been doing it for 25 years now. And that also, though, for the clients that want that behavioral analysis I just talked about looking at the typing rate and stuff so you can detect a compromised credential, that's very unique. Nobody else has that in the industry. So we've put out a solution here called Verify Trust, which is just that capability that plugs into the Oktas and the others of the world. So we can extend that IDP to provide this behavioral analytics and discover that compromised credential usage out of the box. The fourth one is governance, of course, and we've been doing governance for 22 years, 23 years. And then finally for PAM, we have Verified Privileged Identity. That is based on our partnership with Delinea, which is well known as the most scalable and easy to use PAM solution, as opposed to one or two of the other well-known ones that are powerful but not as easy to use. And then we also have HashiCorp Boundary, which allows you to do secure remote access on the development side of things, which is seen as kind of a PAM-ish kind of thing. So that's what we offer today. But as I said at the outset of this thing, there's one more thing that we provide, which is truly revolutionary. And that is the fact that we give you that ability for identity observability, both the ITDR and the ISPM side of things, finding the shadow assets proactively, and then detecting like policy bypasses. And that's our solution called Verify Identity Protection. It does both of those things. You'll find in the market a lot of tools for ITDR. You'll find some tools, not as much for ISPM. We have them both there. And we're going to say a little bit more about that in a few minutes. But it allows you to find this stuff. It allows you to find that you have 14 copies of Vault Community Edition out there and 5 other certain key managers native to a cloud being used, and allows you to actually start managing that stuff. It shows you when you have an AI agent pop up and not get any kind of identification and just start accessing data and stuff. All of that comes through Verify Identity Protection, or VIP. Now, what I want to drill on now is the one use case that everybody wants to talk about, because it's the one that we're all struggling with the most out there. And I've been to the most sophisticated shops around the globe in the last couple months on this, and I've been with the folks that are just starting out on it, and that is AI agents. How do you handle security in the runtime for agentic AI? And here's kind of the level set, the simple view of what's going on. You have users authenticating to an application, which kicks off some kind of agentic AI. And then you probably have some level of embedded agents. And then eventually you get an agent that's actually accessing some sensitive data on the back end. So the issues that people are having is twofold here. Number one is organizational. Number two is technology. On the organizational side, I've already mentioned this, is you have CISO and IT, which traditionally been focused on the human identities. You have dev, which has been handling loosely the non-human identities for their apps and now their agents, and kind of never the two shall meet. But what we're seeing is almost every briefing we're doing now is including people from dev, from the AI team at the organization, and the CISO. And they're saying, yes, we have to start collaborating more on this because this is a huge issue. Now, why is it a huge issue? This is as blunt as we can be. Every shop we're walking into right now, as soon as you start deploying agents, you're going to find these 4 problems. Number one, accountability. I mentioned it earlier. All of the agents aren't getting a unique identifier, which ideally should be a short-lived dynamic secret. They're just, they're flying blind, or when we get to number 3, Number two, overprivileged. This is so common right now. The developer of the agentic code is sitting there saying, well, the usage case that we're building this for only needs read access to that data. But I can imagine down the road, they'll need write access. So we'll just add it in. And who's checking that? Nobody. So accountability becomes a huge issue. Overprivileged is an almost universal problem with the agents right now. Third is delegation and impersonation. What we're seeing is a lot of times the agent, instead of getting its own unique identifier for accountability, will instead just inherit the identity of the human that started this whole path. So all of a sudden, when you're trying to audit something to happen, you go, well, the user did that. And the user's like, no, I didn't. And no, it didn't. It's just because the agent is impersonating the user. And nobody's checking. Nobody's finding this stuff. But number 4 is the biggest one by far. And number 4 is what everybody's calling the last mile problem. When you eventually get that agent accessing that sensitive data, then it can be down the road. You need to make sure the access that that agent has been given for the original intent that the user had is still appropriate to get access to that data. So who makes that final check? Nobody. It's just happening. And so closing that last mile has become a huge deal. So, of course, with our HashiCorp brethren, we've had a lot of experience now over the last year since we acquired them working on this and working with clients on this. And what we've realized is that there are key elements that you have to have here. You have to have orchestration to orchestrate the human and non-human identities. You have governance that spans this entire flow. And then you need that observability. You got to be able to find the hard-coded secrets in the secrets management sprawl, and you got to find when the secrets manager is being bypassed so this stuff can actually happen. And what you'll see is we deliver that through HashiCorp Vault, IBM Verify, and Verify Identity Protection. Okay, so let's dive in a little bit on these things. And once again, I want to emphasize, because we take a true identity fabric approach here. So if you're already using something like Okta, Entra, whatever, it also works. This whole thing works with that. Vault and VIP work with the other IDPs as well. Okay, so let's dive a little bit, and then we're going to turn to how we can help you actually implement this stuff. So what happens is the way that Verify as an IDP and Vault, of course, as the secrets management engine, is it verifies handling the human authentication, it's handling OAuth, it's handling SSO, and the client-initiated back channel stuff. Because one of the things that's becoming big is clients are realizing when their agentic stuff is doing something that's seen as significant, a lot of times you want to make sure you have, say, a prompt going to one of the IT folks' phone saying, this is about to happen. Do you really want to allow that to happen? So you have a human involvement in some of the more sensitive things going on. And on the Vault side, of course, non-human identities, the secrets management, dynamic short-lived secrets, doling out the credentials, making sure the policy is done, and then brokering with the human side of things to make sure you can capture intent. And so this is all out of the box. There's nothing future here. This is all stuff we're doing today. One of the things that we've actually extended this to, and this is really exciting to us, is that we've also extended it to AI orchestration engines. So you get beyond just the agentic runtime piece to actually the overall orchestration of the agentic stuff in the first place. So we have actually got, and this is actually here today, and we've got this chart in here so you can review it, but we've got the flows from that picture, that diagram I showed you on the previous slide there. We've got the flows down using OAuth and Spiffy of how does an IDP like Verify, HashiCorp Vault, and then things like watsonx Orchestrate, how do they all integrate today for someone that's getting access to a system, to an application, to an agent, whatever, to actually fully function. So this is all working today. We've got this coordination between these things, and this is really super powerful. So that's how far we've gotten to this, and that's why it's crucial that we have partners like Integro that can help you actually make this stuff happen. Okay, so very, very exciting stuff. All right, so now let's point at observability for a minute or two. As I said, all this capability, all this runtime capability is really cool, but if you can't see it, then the CISO, IT, and dev teams have a hard time getting on the same page. So observability gives you that visibility that brings the teams to a table with something very pragmatic to do. And there's two sides of this. The first is find those hard-coded secrets, and then the rest is all the secrets managers for all the bypasses and stuff. So HashiCorp Vault Radar is a tool that we came out with last year that will look at your, Git repositories, et cetera, and find the hard-coded secrets and look for when those secrets are being shared amongst dev teams. So that is a piece that Vault Radar does out of the box, which is cool. The rest of the observability, both posture and the threat management side, the ISPM and ITDR, is done through this tool that I've mentioned called VIP, which is Verified Identity Protection. It finds the proactive shadow stuff, and then it finds the reactive, hey, the policy was just ignored, you need to flag that, okay? So the way this thing does is we partner with our technology partner here, Offmind, for this, and this is the magic of how it happens. What VIP, Verified Identity Protection, does is it's pulling all the network flows, cloud flows, and identity events. And there's an AI engine, which is now like almost 5 years old, that's been learning about typical identity activity for both humans and non-humans, including agents. So it can look just by the activities happening, whether something is a human, whether it's, say, a machine, or whether it's an agent. It'll flag it, it'll look at the policies, it'll look at the identity events, and show you when things are happening that shouldn't be, such as a shadow directory, or how many secrets managers are out there, or you have an agent you just popped up and never called the secrets manager and is doing things, so you have a bypass, or you have a user who's accessing an app without MFA that you thought needed MFA. It discovers all that just because of this simple model of an AI engine that pulls in these three sources of data. So this shows you, and the dashboard is incredible on this thing. It pops the most important things according to your policy to the top, over 70 detection logics, as we call it, out of the box. And when you click on a very specific particular event, it shows you all the data that led to it flagging it. So you can see the genesis of where did the problem originate from and how did it grow into something that popped to the top. And so incredibly powerful capability, and this is through VIP. So the most common things, there's over 150 things it does observability against around identities, both human and non-human. But the ones that are most common is the shadow stuff, the MFA issues, and then the bypass of such as the secrets managers. That's the things that most people use this for. And it's what it does is it's very flexible in how it gets deployed. So for example, some folks will say, well, look, I really don't want to pull in all the network flows and cloud flows. We already do a bunch of work to narrow down the most important network flows and cloud flows into our SIM, for example, something like Splunk. And so what we can do with VIP is just pull that data out of Splunk instead of going and pulling it all from places on the network and in the cloud. Once it does that, it does mapping across it, sends it into the deep learning engine. Once again, it's almost 5 years old, so it's learned a lot. And then when it finds something that pops up, it also has the response capability of like calling out to a SOAR engine to actually then go remediate, automate the remediation of what's going on. And as I said, what it does is rely on flow sensors, and you can put them in a number of different places. It's very, very flexible how you roll this thing out. So one of the things that we do with our friends at Integro is we'll come in and do a security posture assessment on identities for you and give you a sense of all the stuff we just talked about, where is the lowest hanging fruit. I will tell you, in a number of organizations that we've been to recently, the issue has not been needing an assessment. It's we know we have an issue on that agentic stuff, and let's start there. So that's I would observe, even though we're more than willing to do this posture assessment for you, we know what the low-hanging fruit right now is, and you probably do too. So that's what we wanted to share formally with you, is that manual IAM, things like the original SIMs I talked about, disconnected teams and tools, the hard coding, that's very manual, of secrets, is migrating from that to actually automating this stuff and leveraging AI, right, to protect even the agentic AI, is really top of mind and the front door issue that we're running into right now. And to be able to do this well, of course, you need folks that know how to do this in practice on the ground. And so I'm going to turn it over to Jim to tell you about how our friends at Integro can do this for you.
Sure. Thanks, Bob. That was a mouthful. Yeah, so I think, if you don't know who we are, we're obviously a bit smaller than IBM, but yet a global IAM strategy, compliance, subject matter organization, and full lifecycle integrator. We work with a lot of IBM customers. We work with multiple vertical markets. We work with a lot of folks who are just trying to endeavor into, we know we're broken. We know we have shadow identity situations. We know our AI policy is weak. How do we traverse this cavern now, right? And we'll go into a couple of quick stops where there are some things we do. I think you've got the con, Bob. Can you pop me forward?
Oh, yeah.
Here?
Yep.
Thanks. So there are a few things that we will do for people that are complementary just to help them get started, right? Of note to the subject matter that we're talking about today, Bob brought up the posture assessment. Yeah, a lot of people kind of know what their problems are, but when they see identity activity that they have no idea where all the shadow activity is going, and they can actually see a workflow across any of their identity providers, whether it's Okta or obviously IBM or anything else they're using, they're usually shocked because they've never seen anything like that before. And before we started working with it, we hadn't either. So being able to see where someone is at a point in time in a workflow, what they're accessing, what governance rules they're breaking, and stuff like that is an eye-opener. So that's one of the things, as Bob said, that we do. Also, what's important is the posture assessment goes hand in hand with the detect and respond component so that we can feed any information not only back to how we're fixing the identity workflow, but also even red teams, right? They can benefit from the detect and respond information that we're seeing up against the identity kind of mini firewall, if you will. So another thing that we do, because this is very relevant, is help people with compliance health checks. A large part of all of these, and we're doing them with every customer we work with in the identity space now, need to do what we call attestation. They need to be able to ping every user in their enterprise, either quarterly, semi-annually, annually in some cases, to meet these compliance objectives, right? So ISO 27001 is a SOC best practice. 20,000 is a Network Operations Center best practice. For NERC or FERC, which are energy-related compliance standards. PCI for people doing e-commerce. Sarbanes-Oxley for public companies. Graham-Leach-Bliley or GLBA for financial services. GDPR, which we know about European privacy policy. HIPAA and healthcare. Pick one, your favorite flavor. They all do the same thing. And that is basically requiring us to ping everybody in the enterprise, gain responsibility back from them to say, we can validate through this sample set of log events that this person is who they say they are. If you are out of compliance, you're getting fined. If you have fake people in your user directory or orphans in your LDAP, as we say, you're getting fined, right? We all kind of know that. So what we're able to do with Verify Identity Governance is to grab those log events, feed them into a SIM, or even handle it directly from Verify, which we can do too, and handle that compliance regimen neatly. So that's another thing that we help people to think through at the, at probably 10,000 feet, because people spend so much time, every customer we go into has a team of people pulling log events off of AD, off of other IDPs that they have, putting them in Excel spreadsheets times a million log events. And then they eventually, the 15 people working on it, ship it off to the auditor to try to prove that they are in fact compliant. You can save money in one step by automating that process, right? Okay, let's move on real quickly to zero trust maturity. People have been talking about this for probably 8 or 10 years now, Bob, and the word is the most overused word in technology, I think. But the net is we help people also simplify their network topology, thereby reducing, kind of their exposure and getting toward least privilege. In a lot of cases, people that are doing attribute or role modeling across an enterprise have multiple theaters, many countries they're working in, multiple network segments. They don't really work together that much. You have in-country IT teams doing different things. So we help them to plan about how to simplify everything prior, usually, to going into a full identity automation build out. Again, we're doing several of those with IBM Verify Identity Governance now. So that's another critical part of this maturity plan that helps you optimize all the things Bob was just talking about as we build identity workflow across an enterprise. If we're able to do that and we provision all of their applications like we do, imagine having every transaction you do in your enterprise protected by 256 KB encryption. Every single one, if you do this right. So there are no leakages, there are no opportunities for, really phishing attacks or other areas because you're so disjointed. And that's our goal, right? Our goal is to take this, automate your IAM process, and so it is not in effect attack surface. So the way that we do that is we connect to all of your enterprise applications. We pull the information from every directory, from every LDAP. We create a new role model generally around all of that, including Active Directory, and we're able to govern everything from one place so that when a new person is onboarded, we can give them access on day one by their role to everything they should have access to. And if somebody leaves, we can deprovision them. Ironically, I had a call from a woman this morning, and in one of our customers, we're not working on this stuff with them. And I said, what's going on? And I said, by the way, you sent me a text. And she said, no, I didn't. And I said, really? And she goes, yeah, I don't know what it is. I think it's this constant contact breach that we had. And the net is, I said, are you provisioning users through the cloud to constant contact? Through any means you have? Like, I know they have Active Directory and Windows 365. And she goes, no. And I said, how are you managing your passwords? Is there secrets management? Like Bob was talking about earlier with Vault? No. So not only has all of their email been compromised now, but it's actually gotten through to her phone directory and her personal telephone directory now. So she's sending me phishing texts from Constant Contact's breach to her application stack to the next phase of, are you kidding me, right? And I'm sure she's not the only one experiencing this. So if we're able to automate that provisioning to every application, to every cloud application you work with, and we do that directory integration to one place, as simple as possible, we can easily accomplish least privilege. We can help people get down their zero trust journey so that people don't have access to all these assets that they always shouldn't have after they've mutated for a decade, right? So that is, part of the meat of the discussion today. Excuse me. One of the other things I'm going to do is go down to the right here and talk briefly about AI corporate policy development. Because I think what's important is Bob was talking about orchestration earlier, right? Excuse me. And how, verify a combination of verify solutions basically identify, a lot of challenges and shadow activity that are going on there. Before governance, a lot of people benefit greatly from actually doing a corporate policy assessment. Because we are great at responding to the problem that's already out there, but we also try to prevent the problem from happening in the first place. So when we go through these corporate policy assessments, we look at your LLM, we look at all the access governance principles that are being utilized across the organization. Excuse me. And we try to gain a thorough understanding of the use cases, what people are doing to the application owners, and hopefully, we can have some impact prior to people being on calls like I was on recently, where we had an awkward moment where we're going through a project. A developer is logged into a WebEx that we're working on a dev environment. The customer says, well, sometimes we automate this with our AI tools that are governed. And I said, really? And I said, what are you using, developer? And the developer said, I'm using Jupyter. And the manager said, oh, that's not an authorized governed tool. And the net is that person's accessing half of the corporate data with this AI agent that's not even governed or even provisioned for. So not only are they not tied to an identity, but they're popping in and out of development environments and touching source code, both prod and dev level source code, from a non-trusted source. So that's just what I'd call the stupid stuff. And I think obviously people that have been through that, our goal is to try to give you the visibility over the course of time with orchestration and the observability that Bob was talking about earlier. But also we try to prevent some of that condition from occurring at the outset if we can. So the last part I'll talk about is business value assessment. As you can see, the portfolio here is extremely broad. We have customers who are using to accomplish all of these objectives, probably 50 to 100 tools at times. So we do help people to simplify a lot of these processes and to help them get down to the least common denominator for tools and spend that they're using in the enterprise. As Bob was talking about earlier, we have a couple of core packs here that help people accomplish about 100 objectives in just a few tools. So that's another thing that we still do. And I think I've been doing that for 25 years, probably. So, we can probably move on to the next one.
Yep.
And then we can, we're just about ready to call it quits. So, so if there are questions at this time or anything further, I think we're happy to take those. And Bob, thanks very much for going through all of that information there.
Yeah, for sure. So, we appreciate everybody joining. And do we have any questions?
Are there any out there, Courtney?
Let me just check the Q&A.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see any. Oh wait, I think somebody sent me a private one. How can we automate compliance? Send on that one.
That's a great question. I'll take a crack at it, Bob, if that's okay.
Oh yeah, it's for you.
Yeah. So again, what we were talking about before is if you use Verify for identity governance, for example, we basically, in fact, I think I just kind of went over some of that, but we're collecting the log events from the authoritative source directory. We can send those to your SIM your SIM can already, if you're using one, can already aggregate that data into pre-built compliance reports. And you can turn this whole process into a one-day event instead of a 10-week event. So it's a pretty easy way to do that, because all the compliance regimens are about, really collecting and aggregating those log events. Pretty much everything. In fact, I was even talking to Department of Energy in the U.S. Government yesterday about how that's kind of working now, and they're trying to simplify that process. So that's generically, from the identity governance part, how we do that. So
Yeah, I think that nails it.
Okay. Are we good otherwise?
I think so.
Looks like, is there another one there? I heard you mention Microsoft 365 as being one of the riskier sites. What makes it more of a risk than any other site? That's an interesting question. I guess we can say our opinions are our own here, and not necessarily the opinions of Integro and IBM. I can say, Bob might have his own opinion on this. I can say they have an incredible amount of DNS activity, probably more than nearly anybody else. Because of 365, the browser standardization, it is a very, I guess, desirable target or payload for APT groups around the world, and state actors, as we know. So it's probably, I wouldn't say they've got a large burden, let's just say that, for the amount of email clients that are out there alone. So, not all, as we say on the threat side, not all payloads are created equal. And they certainly have a lot to lose if people try to gain access there, because they can compromise an entire enterprise based on these 365 groups that are out there, companies, organizations, etc. So that might be, one area. They've since, I know, changed from a development perspective to being a lot more proactive on code drops. It used to be Microsoft Tuesdays where we would get a lot of the updates. Now we get them virtually in runtime, and they're doing even different drops a day depending on which product you're talking about. So we don't dislike Microsoft. We think they do a good job. Yeah. Did you have anything to add to that, Bob, that you wanted to tackle?
Yeah, I think you said it well.
Okay. Again, these are just our opinions, not the opinions of our organizations.
I think we've got all the questions answered. Thanks again, Bob and Jim, for spearheading this. We'll get everyone out the recording at the end. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Great. See you, everybody. We'll see you
Thanks,
around.
Bob.